The war in Ukraine has come home to us here in America. Even though we are not directly involved in the war in Ukraine, we're now being affected by it. And I don't say that in a way that, oh, this is our fight, we have to go get involved in the fight and, and take on the Ruskies. What I mean is that the disruption to the global commodities markets is going to have an immensely negative impact on not just America, but the world over. Already where I live, diesel fuel is over $5 a gallon. Gasoline will catch up in due time, I assure you. That is, if we continue down the road that we have been progressing, if our leaders, and I use that term loosely, but the people who are in political power currently in the United States, they don't get their act together. If they don't grow up, which I don't think that they will, I think that they're fundamentally unserious people who are completely out of touch with reality. Things are going to keep getting worse, and it's not just the price of oil, but as of this recording, WTI, West Texas Intermediate, is sitting around $120 a barrel. It was like $125 this morning, I think. But given what's on the table right now, what we thought was unthinkable, but is quickly becoming a reality, the price of oil could easily reach $200 a barrel in a matter of weeks, if not months. And that reality that I so greatly fear is a total end to Russian oil exports to the Western world. Oil and gas, I should specify. There is a growing cohort. In fact, I would go so far as to call it a cacophony in the U.S. Congress. Bipartisan, some of the loudest members of Congress, all getting together in unison. Always be scared when there's bipartisanship in the U.S. Congress. That's always when the worst things in the world are bipartisan, have bipartisan support in the U.S. Congress. Just keep that in mind. This bipartisan group is now calling on the U.S. executive branch to just unilaterally, through dictatorial powers, ban all Russian oil. And of course, if they want to go far enough, they will sanction countries that purchase Russian oil, because the U.S. feels that it has that power. It has the power, they think, to tell other countries, whom they can and cannot trade with. They did this with Iran. They have made Iranian oil contraband the world over. Now, people still buy Iranian oil, but it has to be smuggled out of Iran. More on that later, because, of course, we have an update on the Iran deal, the JCPOA. I have no idea if I'll have time to get to it. I can almost guarantee that I won't, but I should get to it today. I need to. But back to a second for Russian oil. The U.S. essentially wants the entire Western world, all the so-called international community, the adults in the room, the European Union, the United States, Canada, the Anglosphere, all of the countries that matter, plus any other small countries that they can, kick in the pants and tell them what to do. They'll go along with it, but other countries don't necessarily. It's the countries' big economies that consume all the energy, because remember, there's a direct correlation between how much oil you use and how big your economy is. These countries that have puny little economies, that live in abject poverty, they don't consume a lot of oil, which is why you should be, another reason, I don't want to get off on an anti-green energy rant here, but when you hear all these people talking about how we need to go reach net zero carbon emissions and how we need to get off of oil, they're telling you that they want you to be poor. But anyway, the U.S. wants all of these rich countries to stop buying Russian oil. However, if you do that, of course, you're removing supply from the global oil markets. Demand, on the other hand, all else equal, will remain constant. Well, let's think back to Economics 101. Those of you, who took it in high school or college or whatever. What's the basic what's the idea here? What would happen if you hold demand, all else equal, constant, and you reduce supply? If you have a supply side shock, oh, that's right, you get a spike in the price of that good. Republicans and Democrats, people across the political spectrum, are banding together to try and engineer a massive spike in energy prices. Why? Because they want to virtue signal how much they love Ukraine. Actually, it's because Ukraine has, last I checked, the biggest lobbying operation in all of Washington. They have more lobbyists than Saudi Arabia, from what I've heard. And the Ukrainian lobbyists, unfortunately, feel that if they're going to have to go down, which they are, it would appear that Ukraine is not going to be of this world for much longer, the way things are going. Sadly, I do not think that they will accept a peace deal. I wish they would, but there's too much pressure on them not to. So I think that the Russians will take advantage of that and probably grab as much as they want. I don't know how much Russia will leave of Ukraine, but at the very least, they'll take, if you remember the maps from 2014, when there were uprisings across, parts of Russian-speaking Ukraine, the map of, Novorossiya, they'll at least take that. But I don't want to make this about the war. I've been neck deep in that war for over a week. But the point is, the war is not going well. It's not going to end well. And I think the Ukrainians want to take the rest of the West down with them. Because that's what this amounts to. The West cutting itself off from Russian oil and gas is not cutting off their nose to spite their face. It's cutting off their left leg to spite their right arm. If we remove the massive supply of Russian oil and gas from Western economies, that supply cannot be replaced. The result is we will have less energy to go around. Supply will be reduced in absolute terms. And if we have less energy that we can consume, not only is the price of that energy going to skyrocket and harm everyone, and again, I'm just talking about energy. I'm not talking about the other commodities, which maybe I'll get to if I have time. I'm very concerned about fertilizer. That's something that I deal with directly, because being in Florida, we have, agriculture and tourism. That's all we got. But there I go again. I'm 8 minutes in. I'm just now getting to the point. If there's less energy, our economies must necessarily shrink. We will have less energy to consume. We cannot replace that Russian energy. The Saudis are not going to, increase their production. It's not even clear if they have the capability to increase their production enough to account for the loss of Russian oil and gas production. But they've already said no. The Saudis are not on terrible terms with Russia, and so they're not going to aid us to that extent. The United States, on the other hand, certainly cannot pick up the slack. The shale bubble in this country burst a long time ago, and you're not going to attract new investment into the American oil industry unless there is discovered some way to lower the cost per barrel of American oil. What American investors learned the hard way last time is that when oil prices skyrocketed around 2008, all of a sudden these new technologies, around the shale oil and whatnot, these methods of extracting oil, which were, so expensive, all of a sudden became economical because the price per barrel of oil rose significantly above, I forget what it was, like $70 a barrel, I think it cost. And so they invested in all these shale companies, and they were making money until oil went below around $70 a barrel, and they all went bankrupt, and everybody lost their money. So that was a bad investment. Did not pan out well. So they're not going to make that mistake again. Certainly not, within the same decade. And even if they did, it's not like these are spigots that can just be turned on and turned off. We can't just restart, the American oil industry and replace Russia. It's not going to happen. It doesn't happen overnight. Even if we could, it would take us, months to years to catch up. And so, like I said, economies across the West, and this is including the United States, because one of the arguments that these sick, twisted politicians are making is that, it won't hurt us that bad, even though oil's already at $120 a barrel. Oh, it won't hurt us that bad because Russia only supplies like 10% of American oil or something like that. Or maybe it's less than 10%. I can't remember exactly, but it's not a huge number. Of course, when you're talking about economics, 10% is a huge number when you're talking about the total supply. That's a big deal. But they're saying it's not. They're saying, it's not like we buy half our oil from Russia. It'll only increase the prices a bit for us. Well, no, because then, guess what? Even though we don't buy that much Russian oil compared to some other countries, like, let's say, all the countries in Europe, Germany, if they are not buying their oil from Russia, they have to find some source to replace that. Let's say, I think it's 40% in Germany of their oil comes from Russia. They have to replace 40% of their oil supply. Well, what are they going to do? They're going to go around and buy oil from all the people that, we here in the United States are buying oil from. The Saudis, and who else? The Angolans. And so they're going to cut into, getting rid of Russian oil doesn't just affect that little bit of oil that we buy from Russia. It affects the price of the entire global oil market. That's how commodities markets work. And so if other countries that consume a lot of Russian oil all of a sudden don't have access to that oil anymore, they are going to suck more oil from everywhere else in the world. So again, we will have less oil. And therefore, fundamentally, we will have a shrinking economy. We are going to go into a depression. That's what this means. It's as simple as that. Less energy, less economic output. I've said it in the past, I'll say it again. Carbon is the building block of life. It's the foundation of human civilization. What separates man from beast is fire. And if we can't have as much fire, if we don't have as much to burn, if we can't, utilize as much of the energy from this planet as we are, not only as we are accustomed to doing, but if we're not increasing that consumption year over year, we will go into a depression. That's reality. And so I have to say, I've never been one of these call your congressman people, because frankly, I'm too apathetic when it comes to politics. I don't care that much. I think that, everything that politicians care about and talk about is normally, stupid crap that doesn't matter. But this is the first time in my life I'm thinking, what? I might just call up Marco Rubio and Rick Scott's office, and leave them a nasty message with one of their staffers. Because this is inexcusable. This is I can't imagine. I was really young. Like, I don't know. I don't remember the start of the Iraq War very well. I was a very young child. But other than that, I can't think of anything in my lifetime that would have been such an obvious calamity that Congress did. Because think about it, lots of the other stuff in my lifetime, like the war in Libya, that had nothing to do with Congress. That just went right through the White House. The White House just decided we're going to go to war with Libya, and then we did. And Congress opposed the war in Syria, which was good. But of course, the war in Yemen is something that was pretty much carried out by, again, the White House. But this is something that Congress is pushing for that is just so obviously terrible and will ruin the lives of millions of people. Oh, and of course, this won't be a normal depression. It's not going to be a depression that is caused, by the bursting of a normal, credit bubble that is caused by, the Fed or the banking system, inflating, a credit bubble by printing a bunch of money and then withdrawing that new money and creating a monetary contraction and jacking up interest rates and and sending a bunch of malinvestments into bankruptcy. This is the kind of depression that's going to be caused by just literally choking out the economy with higher energy costs, which will make the costs and the price of all goods go up. And so this will be an inflationary depression. We're going to be going to a depression because things will be so expensive to buy. In a normal, depression that would be caused by deflationary monetary policy, which is a good thing. I like deflation. It's important to purge all those bad investments. I'd prefer that they weren't, created to begin with, that they don't create the bubble. But once you've created the bubble, you got to take your medicine and let it pop. The bright side of that kind of a depression is that, well, at least prices are falling. At least the cost of living is going down. So yes, you have tough economic times, but stuff's getting cheaper, and that alleviates some of the pain. But what they're doing right now is going to make everything even more expensive than it is now. The rate of inflation is going to get worse, all else equal. And a lot of us are going to lose our incomes. People are going to go out of business. It's as simple as that. I hope I'm wrong, but, this is a pretty obvious thing. Look at the oil embargo in the 1970s, which was short-lived. Who knows how long this whole oil issue is going to last. But, this is as much of a self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head that you could ever ask for from any country or society. And now we're hearing the Russians are thinking of just cutting off the West themselves, preemptively. They're thinking of closing Nord Stream 1. They already canceled Nord Stream 2, and that was terrible for energy prices and, of course, fertilizer prices, because remember, fertilizer is synthesized largely from natural gas. Apparently, Belarus, I'm told, is a big producer of phosphate, as we are here in Florida. And so that also is helping to drive up fertilizer prices. Which, of course, will make our food more expensive. That's the other thing. All this stuff, it's going to hurt us much more than we could ever hurt the Russians, because the Russians, produce surpluses of basic necessities within their country, and they export them. Russia produces steel. I believe it's a net exporter of steel, certainly net exporter of energy, net exporter of food. They produce their own cars, all these things. So, the basic things in life. Even if, let's say, a Gucci purse is embargoed or whatever, it can't get access to that, or ridiculously expensive, the Russian people shouldn't feel too much pain when it comes to basic necessities as far as inflation goes. Inflation should be isolated to more discretionary items or more niche items, but they won't have to worry about having access to food to the extent that we will here in the West. When you see these policies are going to have a direct impact on the supply of food, supply of energy. In Russia, it won't be interrupted. In fact, there will be a surplus of it because all of a sudden they won't be exporting all this food and energy to other countries as much, and they will be able to keep more of it at home, which will just drive down the price there. And remember, here in America, we don't have, and I think this, ordinarily this is a good thing, but when you pair this kind of, openness with crazy politicians who want to destroy the global economy, you have to worry about, hey, it's not like we have export bans or export quotas in this country. If the price of oil is rising outside of the U.S., we're going to export that oil and get that higher price. Same thing is true with food. If the price of food is rising elsewhere, even if we're able to produce as much food here in the United States, we're just going to export more food in order to get the money. It goes to the highest bidder. So therefore, the price of food will rise here too. And so this is all just so terrible. And I'm going to be talking about it more in the future when I have time. But this is your brief introduction. Welcome to the end. kind of a sideshow. But in time, this will become much more significant than the war in Ukraine itself. So with that said, I will see you folks back here tomorrow.